Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Johnson & Johnson Institute webinar series. My name is Karen Cheng from Johnson & Johnson Professional Education Team in Asia Pacific. Today, we are very privileged to have Mr. John Waering with us. John runs a successful performance coaching business in the UK. He works with a number of different international clientele who seek to understand how to use their energy and intellect in an intelligent way. So how does it relate to today's webinar? Today, John will be sharing with us consideration of some of the operational requirements of the new normal and implications on behavior for professionals, retailers, suppliers, and customers. Prior to passing over to John, there are a few housekeepings that need to be reminded. Please be reminded that we are in the webinar mode. Therefore, all participants will be put on mute. Only the presenter and the facilitator will be unmuted. However, if you have any question during the webinar, please raise it through the Q&A section by clicking the Q&A icon on your screen. After the webinar, we will hold a live Q&A session with John. The chat function will now be disabled so that we can streamline all questions to the Q&A section. Now, over to you, John, and looking forward to learn from you today.
Thank you very much, Karen. Hello and welcome, everybody. It's a pleasure to see so many people online from the Asia Pac region for our webinar today. So I guess you're going to be a little bit curious about what I suspect for many of you at least will be some new ways of looking at things to stimulate the way we are approaching the new reality of coexisting with COVID-19. And certainly based on the poll data from the registration process that you went through, some really interesting findings to share with you a little later. But first, just a quick personal introduction to give you some context. So, as Karen said, our business is around business performance coaching. We're working with organizations who prioritize essentially three things: happy customers, a great reputation for delivering value, and a serious aspiration for achieving high performance. And we're working with our clients in one of two ways, usually. Firstly, helping them to understand what drives their current level of performance and how to optimize in order to achieve their goals. And secondly, working with their people to develop both fluency and consistency in applying mindset, skills, and process for uncovering, creating, and trading value. And what we get great feedback on is our ability to generate sustained transformation in the performance of both individuals and teams, where the return on investment is experienced through greater quality and productivity in the way people work and the way they win and deliver business. So impact measured in traditional ways like better quality and quantity of sales, improved customer satisfaction, and greater colleague connectedness. And for myself, increasingly, I find I'm working with committed leaders who are seeking to improve their own impact and resilience, but perhaps most importantly, drive greater organizational, team and individual performance. And that's certainly relevant in the context of reopening businesses, right? With these leaders, I'm providing support and challenge to help them think and execute correctly under pressure in order to achieve their strategic, personal and professional goals. And what they tell me they most appreciate is the way I help them to interpret, understand and navigate the high intensity environments within which they're naturally operating, supporting them in maintaining focus, forging effective habits, but ultimately sustaining a principled, purposeful, high performance culture in their organizations. And a lot of what I share is founded on insights from performance psychology in the world of elite sport. I normally at this point mention that I have a science background to position the sort of rigor I bring to what I share with people that I'm coaching. It's also relevant to say that my science background specifically was in microbiology, and I've always had a strong interest in infectious disease. Some might say a little bit obsessive when I see people walking down the street, sneezing and coughing. I'm always, shuddering inside, thinking, into a tissue, please. We have a phrase in the UK, catch it, bin it, kill it, right? It's really relevant right now. So, but a serious point, the things I'm sharing with you that relate to physiology and psychology, I'm confident stand up to rigor because of the science behind it. I'm going to signpost the session now. So first of all, we're going to look at how we see the context within which we're operating and responding accordingly. We're then going to look at the kind of the attitude or mindset that we bring to dealing with problems. And having explored that, we're then going to expand and go deep on what do we mean by mindset and how do we build a mindset that supports us in getting into this new normal situation, particularly given the data that I've now received from your polls, which revealed a high level of anxiety about the survivability of businesses and also sort of personal concerns, I guess, around your own health and safety and that of people in your stores. We'll then move into sort of more practical considerations with a strong focus on thinking about the psychology of your customers, people who will be, entering your stores as things reopen. What do we need to take into account to ensure we're doing the most to make things safe for them and to attract them in? And then finally, we will have some time for Q&A. Now, around the world, nations are starting to relax lockdown, and everybody's very keen, obviously, to restart economies and therefore your businesses. And we all face a significant challenge in learning to coexist, I guess, with COVID-19. So my purpose here is to share some concepts from the world of high performance coaching that may inspire fresh ways of looking at how best you can adapt to this new reality. And if there were three things I think you're going to take away from today's session, I guess one will be the fact that there's no ready-made answers. It's about evolution. And this is going to require all of our personal leadership. The second point is, in order to do this successfully, you really will need to take control of the thing that you have most control of in all of your life, which is your mindset. This is your attitude towards this challenge. And I'm going to show you how to do that. And finally, the third takeaway is very much about putting your customers' emotional concerns at the heart of your thinking as you're reopening your business, as you're building an online presence. And again, I'm going to give you some pointers around that. Okay, so let's make a start. So what I'm going to build on screen in a moment is a 2x2 grid that is a way of looking at the situation or the context that we find ourselves in. And the two axes here are uncertainty and intensity. I'm going to start with a situation of high uncertainty but low intensity. We call this not yet a problem. Okay, so when something isn't yet a problem, but it may be potentially in the future, the style of response is all about monitor and research. If we then go to the bottom left, a situation of low uncertainty and low intensity, we call this a tame problem. Tame meaning we've made it safe because we've seen it before. We've already got a process for dealing with this situation. And the style for dealing with tame problems is called management, where management is about bringing specific inputs to a process with governance to get a predictable and consistent outcome. And if we wrap that round with continuous improvement, then we've got high quality management. And that's what, most people are doing most of the time with existing processes, with stuff they understand. Now, moving to the right, raising the intensity, but still a low level of uncertainty, we have what's called a crisis or a critical problem. So if the building's on fire, there's no uncertainty as to what the outcome is if we stay in the building, right? But there's high intensity because the outcome, if we stay in the building, is not going to be good. And in a crisis, what we need is a subject matter expert or an authority figure to take command, to take control, to give an instruction. Everybody leave through the fire exit. So the appropriate style for dealing with a critical problem, command and control. Somebody issues an instruction. Now, finally, we have what for me is perhaps the most interesting quadrant, which is a situation of high uncertainty and high intensity. This is a situation we've not seen before. We don't have a ready-made answer. I've already given you a clue. This is kind of what COVID-19 is all about. It's called a wicked problem, okay? Because we don't have a ready-made answer, we're going to have to work it out. And the style for addressing wicked problems is called leadership. And I'm defining leadership as where we bring a bunch of people together in a team or in an organization, and the leader is catalyzing an understanding of what is it that we're dealing with. So it's building shared expectations about where we are and where we want to get to, about how we're going to operate together. It's exciting the commitment of every member of that team or organization to their part in working out what we need to do. And it's about enabling their performance, supporting people with the resources, removing interferences. So that's what leadership is about. So this is a very simple model, yet very powerful in keeping us focused on what we need to do, dependent on the context that we're experiencing. And I'm just going to share with you an analysis of how two nations in particular have responded to COVID-19. So I'm taking the example of South Korea. It's a little bit smaller than the UK in population, but rough order of magnitude, it's in the same ballpark. Interestingly, the experience in South Korea of COVID-19, it kicked off on January the 19th, when a heat sensor at Seoul Airport detected patient 0. And immediately, so by the way, that's monitoring, okay? They got lots of research because of their experience of SARS. They have these heat sensors in the airport. So they're monitoring for something happening. As soon as it happens, they had an amazing crisis management program that they put in place. So people knew what to do. At the same time, they commandeered the chemical industry. And within 17 days, they had diagnostic tests that allowed them to test, trace, and isolate people who'd become infected. Could I just say that in the UK, we are still not testing, tracing, and isolating. They're just talking about it. Only people with the infection get tested. It's shocking. So in South Korea, we're seeing great examples of monitoring, research, management, and command at appropriate times. And then as they're starting to move to relax the lockdown, to working out how do they coexist with COVID-19, which is where the leadership is. In the UK, I've already indicated we've had very little. We've had people putting up colourful flags in the street, and we've had people coming up with snappy slogans. And there is lots of confusion and concern. And you know, the results are really very painful to share with you, because in terms of deaths, South Korea, as of yesterday, was reporting 263 deaths in a population of 51 million. In the UK, we're over 40,000 deaths. We have the sad position of being leading Europe in terms of incidence of COVID-19 and fatalities as a result of this terrible infection, which is a huge tragedy. And it's just a shame that our government doesn't seem to understand this contextual styles matrix and acting accordingly. Okay, the point though that I want to make, the new normal of coexisting with COVID-19 is a wicked problem. We will need to iterate new ways of operating until either there is a universally available vaccine or COVID-19 is eradicated from human beings and the animal transmission bridge is broken. So I've talked a lot about problems, so let's do a little poll. Ahmad, please. Fascinating to see the results coming in on screen here. So it seems it's very interesting. Sort of broadly half of the audience really focused on having a clear problem statement. That's where their attention is. The other half is pretty much split 50-50 between feeling this is negative, we should be focused on the solution, or kind of gripped by indecision, unsure what to do for the best. And that's actually very normal. Which is why I thought it would be useful just to kind of share some thoughts around attitude towards problems and how best to really think about, I guess, the word problem. So, you know, it's clear for some people, a problem can be hugely disconcerting to the extent that the emotional centers of our brain can be sort of gripping us in that indecision, or even sort of catastrophizing, thinking of what's the worst that can happen. You know, there's the apocryphal story, certainly in the West, there's a story around Henny Penny, or in the States is known as Chicken Licking or Chicken Little. When a leaf falls on its head, it thinks the world is ending and runs around saying, you know, save your lives, the sky is falling, this is a disaster. So problems for some people can feel very negative. For other people, the optimist response is very much kind of, I don't want to hear about the problems, bring me solutions. And this is a very predominant kind of mindset in the United States, who have actually exported this sort of optimistic perspective around the world. And some of you clearly may well share this mindset as well. I want you to pause for a moment and reflect whether being completely optimistic and just saying, don't bring me the problem, bring me the solution, is really the most helpful mindset, especially if the people involved don't really understand what the problem is that they're actually dealing with. The rush to solution without understanding the problem is dangerous. We could be wasting our energy and our effort. And Karen used a phrase that I often use when I'm talking about what I do as a coach, helping people to use their energy and intellect in an intelligent way. Okay, now, if you're one of the millions of people who have seen the 1990 movie The Matrix, starring Keanu Reeves as Neo, then you would remember that Neo was given a choice by Morpheus, the rebel leader of humans fighting the machine world, to take either the red pill or the blue pill, okay? The red pill was all about opening Neo's eyes to reality, to free him from the enslaving control of the machine-generated dream world, which was called the Matrix, and allow him to escape into the real world, although living in the truth of that reality was very harsh and difficult. Or taking the blue pill would allow him to stay comfortably in a pod in this sort of simulated dream state. And I find this is a useful metaphor for thinking about the mindset we bring to problems. With the red pill comes knowledge, it comes freedom, but absolutely it's harsh. We really do live in a world that's volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, and it's often unfair. And we just look back in human history to see how true that is. And of course, we can get comfortable with periods of stability and feel that, this is a great place to be and this is how we always want it to be. But there will always be things that happen. But the temptation of living with misinformation, and today misinformation is deliberately being propagated with political agendas. Having material freedom, comfort, security, the sort of blissful ignorance state of mind can be very comforting. But I guess there's a question that we all need to be asking ourselves. If we actually want to move forward with a situation, are we prepared to confront the brutal reality in order to deal with the root cause, so that when we invest energy in problem solving, we're doing something that's meaningful? So I guess I'm going to pose a question to you. What mindset will you choose? So let's do another quick poll. Emma? Again, fascinating seeing the results coming in. Now, it's clear that the majority of people in the room are absolutely focused on taking the red pill approach, confronting the brutal reality, but not exactly sure how best to make this a habit, which is great, because that sets up what we're going to talk about next. I love the fact there's some incurable optimists in the room, and there's a few people out there who are also perhaps a bit concerned that maybe they think they can't change. I'm going to challenge that perspective, I guess. as we go through. So thank you for that. Really interesting result once again. So let's move on. To talk about mindset. And I think, if I may, before I get into mindset fully, I'm just going to share the data, some of the highlights from the poll that the survey you did and the registration. And I got this information just before we started this morning, so I haven't got it on screen, but I can just talk you through the highlights. The first question was, when do you think the coronavirus or COVID-19 pandemic will be contained and life will return to some degree of normality? And 49% of you are thinking by the end of this year, 16% before September, the other 33 by the end of 2020. So a bit of a 50-50 split, 15% no idea. But what it indicates is there's a long time horizon for quite a lot of people here, which means we're going to be existing with a lot of uncertainty and intensity for quite a period of time. The next question was, do you agree or disagree with the following? We should restart the economy and allow business to open, even if the COVID-19 pandemic is still not fully contained. 68% of you are strongly agreeing we should. Sorry, agree. 23% strongly, 45% somewhat. Now, that's interesting, because the next question was, even if businesses are allowed to reopen and travel resumes, I am going to be very nervous about leaving my home. And 61% of you agree you are. So you're really keen to reopen business, and yet you're quite apprehensive about the risks associated with that, and with good reason. So only Friday, I think, I saw in the the OAP's, which is a UK organisation, published a piece of information that came from the Office of National Statistics in the UK, where they estimated that ECPs were 9th most at-risk profession out of I think about 350 professions. ECPs are 9th most at risk in terms of getting COVID-19. So there is a real and present danger, folks. You recognize it, and at the same time, you're really keen to get going. And for many of you, with this last question, I'm really concerned that my business will never fully recover from the impact of this pandemic. 16% of you strongly agreed, 32% somewhat agreed. So that's 48%, half of you, with a strong concern about the survivability of business, which is a very sobering thought. Now, I want to sort of relax you, I guess, and this is why mindset is so important. So I'll come back to, how do we take forward a positive mindset? But first of all, let's explore what we mean. So what I've put on the screen here is a statement that's saying everything that you've been exposed to that creates a belief about how something happens, this is what makes up your mindset. So it's something that's not really conscious for most people, unless you're practicing some form of religion where you're probably explicitly reflecting on beliefs that your religion is giving you. But the key point I want you to take away is the fact that your beliefs drive your behavior. Okay, what we believe about things, it acts as a filter in our brain, and how we interpret our environment through that filter is then evident in our behavior. Now, what this also means is some of those beliefs can be helpful to us, and some of them may be unhelpful. And so one of the things I do when I'm coaching people is to encourage them to explore, what's a helpful belief look like? What's an unhelpful belief? And to challenge them to do some self-reflection. So In a moment, we're going to take a look at some helpful or unhelpful beliefs. What I do want to make the point of, though, whatever your belief, the more you use it, the truer it is for you. So this is why there's a phrase, whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. Because if you think you can't do something, you don't try and you don't, so your belief is true. If you think you can do something and try, although it may be hard to begin with, and then eventually you start to succeed, it's true. So I'm always saying, pick your beliefs with care. Are they working for you? So let's take a look at what I mean. So let's put an unhelpful belief up on the screen. So it'll all go back to normal in the end. You know, if I think like this in the current context of the COVID-19 pandemic, I'm going to be waiting and waiting for things to go back to how they were like back in 2019. And I'm frankly going to be waiting a long time, and I'm going to be getting more anxious and maybe bitter and frustrated, feeling miserable. My mental health may be being affected. This is not a good use of my energy. Okay? What I encourage people to focus on is, you know what? It is difficult to respond to wicked problems. Work is hard, but no work is harder. Just think about that for a moment. If we didn't have any work, that makes life very hard. So yes, it's going to be challenging to work out how do we evolve a new way of doing business, of working, to coexist. But better that than nothing at all. So I would say it's a helpful belief to just focus on work is hard, no work is harder. Here's another unhelpful belief. Why change the habits of a lifetime? You know, things have worked for me so far. Why would I want to change? Frankly, this is just an excuse that our brain invents so we don't have to try to change. It gives us a kind of a get out of jail free card, an excuse to be a little bit lazy. Often because we think making a change is going to be hard work. We might be concerned about the prospect of failure. But this belief is very much in opposition to the philosophy of continuous improvement. And the thing is, standing still in life and in business is actually going backwards. And I don't recommend this. You know, I'm encouraging you to keep an open mind, to be focused on getting out of your comfort zone. So one of the things that I say to myself every morning as part of my mental preparation, and I was doing this UK time about 5:43 this morning. I made a note so I could share that with you. But I start with this phrase, a mind is like a parachute. It doesn't work if it isn't open. It's this reminder to myself to keep open-minded, to be exploring new possibilities. I can't change. This is a stronger excuse than the one above. If you believe this, you definitely won't try. So you create a self-fulfilling prophecy. This is definitely one of the best illustrations of that phrase that I used earlier. Whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. So how about this? Some people make things happen. Some people watch things happen whilst others wonder what happened. Okay? I want to be the person that makes things happen. I don't want to be watching others making successes of iterating the new normal. I don't want wondering what happened as my business closes because I didn't do anything. I'm going to be the mindset of control the controllables. Let's do something. Here's a sort of an associated one. People don't like change. This is a very common phrase in the English language. It's problematic for at least two reasons. The first of which is, as it's written, it's not true. If I'd written people don't like change that is imposed on them, that would be absolutely true. But in fact, the story of humanity is all about change, about evolving things. Sometimes it's slow, step-by-step change. Sometimes it's massive leaps forward. The other reason that it's unhelpful is that it's a great excuse for inaction and a lack of leadership. So if leaders are thinking, oh, people don't like change, we're going to have to do something different, oh, but they're not going to like it, it invites procrastination, putting off doing something. So I'm rejecting this belief. I embrace a belief that people have a great capacity to adapt, learn, and evolve. That's one of the fabulous things about humanity. That's where my focus is. Because it means that I'm going to be much more responsive, not only to the environment, but trusting and involving people so that they are the catalysts of making whatever transformation is necessary within that wicked problem space. And finally, the last unhelpful belief, if I try something new and it doesn't work out, people will think I'm stupid, making mistakes. Oh, you know, horror of horrors. This belief is very often held by perfectionists, or indeed people who are laboring under what's known as imposter syndrome. I don't deserve to be here. The truth is, if we don't make mistakes, we don't learn anything. So if you're staying in your kind of little bubble of not trying anything new because you don't want to make a mistake, you can't evolve. Therefore, you're going backwards relative to everybody else who is actually making mistakes, understanding them and learning from them and evolving their recipe of, or their processes of how they move forward. So one of the mindsets I have is I never lose. I either win or learn. I'm encouraging all of you to embrace this sort of mindset. Fail fast, learn fast. The point of operating in the wicked problem space is there isn't a right answer yet. So inevitably we're going to make mistakes. It's okay. Test and learn, test and learn. So I've illustrated what I mean by helpful and unhelpful beliefs. So how do you go about creating a mindset that's going to support you in being the best version of you? The first step is really make a choice. Be 100% aware that since your mindset is made of your beliefs, you can choose the critical beliefs that are most helpful to you. In my view, this is the crux of every person's individual personal power, your choice and responsibility. It's amazing and liberating when you start to kind of understand this and make those choices. But it's about exercising quality control. So you need to be mindful. What I mean is by introspection, by reflection, examining your mental and emotional processes, thinking about the beliefs that I have about why do I do this? What's driving that? Where does it come from? Is that useful to me? Do I need to reject it? And so this is kind of a thought process. Sometimes it's looking for inspiration from other people, from things that we read, podcasts that we've heard, talks that we see on Zoom, working out new possibilities. Or sometimes it's just taking the exact opposite of your unhelpful belief and embracing that. Then comes step 3, which is about being committed to practice. To embed any new set of beliefs, you need to kind of bring them to your explicit consciousness to make them real to you, really on an everyday basis. There's no silver bullet to this. You can't just come up with a new belief and think, right, I have a different mindset, because those existing beliefs that you have built up over time. You've used them over and over and over again. You now need to build up some new mental muscle with your new mindset, and that takes daily practice. This is what we call mental preparation. And for a lot of people is a bit kind of strange, weird, maybe sounding that in the morning, part of my daily routine, in the same way as getting washed, brushing my teeth, getting dressed, mental prep, running through my mindset choices. To me, that's as normal as brushing my teeth. I wouldn't dream of starting my day without it. And it means, I'm only spending probably 5, maybe maximum 10 minutes reflecting on this. So it's not a big ask, where I'm reflecting, visualizing what these critical beliefs mean to me. It's not just rushing through them, it's kind of thinking about what's behind them. So it's something novel to experiment with. It always feels uncomfortable when we're doing new things, but I encourage you to give it a go, because if you choose your mindset, you can change your life. And please keep in mind, out of everything in your life, your mindset is the thing you have the most control over. And think about this. If you haven't defined or written down what the best version of you looks like in terms of your critical beliefs, how will you know you've ever achieved it? Okay, so time for a quick poll. Because so far this has all been very theoretical. Okay, so we've got a real split here. The majority are keen to explore new ways of working. And I understand. I mean, I think everybody in their heart would like things to go back to where they were. I'm afraid it's just not going to happen. But I see this as an opportunity, and I'll talk a bit more about what that opportunity means in a moment. So we can close this poll, thank you. That's a pretty clear split. 5% of you out there being very pessimistic. You know what? Unless we embrace this balance of confront the brutal reality and then do something about it, we will get what we confidently expect. So I'm encouraging you to confidently expect things to get better if we work on it. Okay, so moving on. Before, I know I said so far it's been very theoretical. One more theoretical to share with you that's really important in terms of understanding the concerns of your customers, consumers in general, is a little three-part model of the brain that I'm going to share. So to start with, we have the emotional center of our brain that drives our responses. It's the seat of our emotional memories. In anatomical terms, this is referred to as the amygdala. We then have the part of our brain that's the seat of our cognitive processing. This is your prefrontal cortex, the bit of the brain that you're kind of putting in the palm of your hand there. And then finally, we have everything that's taken care of automatically, our habits, that we don't have to think about, that's been put there by our rational and emotional functions. What's really interesting about this, the way the brain works, is the relative power and speed of each part of this simplified model, admittedly, which is saying that our emotional centers 5 times faster and more powerful than our cognitive functions. And the part of our brain that is taking care of things automatically is 20 times faster, more powerful. Now, one of the things that's really essential to appreciate is that the emotional centers of our brain are monitoring our environment for 2 things: threat and reward. And this emotional center, the amygdala, is more sensitive to threat than reward. Now, this is the reason that human beings are regarded as loss averse. Okay, what loss aversion means is we prefer avoiding losses much more than acquiring equivalent gains. So it's better not to lose $5 than to find $5. What this means is the rational basis for action is very often overridden by emotional responses. So we might say that your desire to reopen business because you're very fearful of losing business is very emotionally driven. Rationally, you're very fearful of the risk of COVID-19. So this is, and the same for consumers, you know, or myself. There may be strong rational reasons for me to be going and having an eye exam at the ECP or a health check with my GP. But in this COVID-19 world, my fear of infection may override my rational thought. This means I have a cognitive bias. That's a deviation from rationality in arriving at a judgment on what to do. And all people are busy creating these sort of subjective realities from our perceptions of the environmental inputs that we experience, so that we're not dealing with what's really happening because of this sort of power of the emotional center of the brain. Now, this is an evolved mechanism. The fact that human beings are so-called irrational beings is not a defect. It's a protective mechanism that we've evolved to cope with the fact that there's too much uncertainty, a lot of intensity, too little storage capacity for too much information. And cognitive bias helps us simplify that situation. Two of those elements, by the way, are parts of the scenario of wicked problems. So it's almost like we're, in evolutionary terms, we're not fully or sufficiently evolved. We have to learn to deal with intensity and ambiguity in order to operate effectively as leaders, which might be why, you know, if I look around the political world, we don't see sufficient leadership. Just a thought. Now, I don't have enough time to explain the fascinating world of cognitive bias, but I'm going to give you two recommendations of books. The first one, The Chimp Paradox, Mind Management by Steve Peters, goes into this three-part model of the brain in much more detail. Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman really explains the world of cognitive bias. Kahneman is the preeminent thinker, won a Nobel Prize for economics because of his work on this. In fact, this book is probably, in my view, the most important book that was written in the last 100 years. So it's a strong recommendation. But I needed to share this with you so you realize that your customers are going to be very strongly driven by their emotions. Now, let's look at what are they thinking? What are their concerns? Let's get practical from the perspective of customers, because they're not thinking about your situation, your concerns about getting business up and running, footfall in my store, setting up an online presence. That's not on their radar. It's all about me. That's what they're thinking. So, you know, what if they've heard that ECPs are in the top 10 of professions most likely to catch COVID-19? So I want to go in their store. And what about social distancing? You know, I know what your breath smells like, ECP. I've been there. We're too close. Is this going to be safe for me? Should I even be using contact lenses? Oh, you know, I'm putting stuff in my eyes. Is that really the appropriate thing to be doing right now? You and I know different, but this is going to be a very valid concern that consumers might have. If I go to the store, you know, what about other people? I'm maintaining my distance, but are they maintaining their distance from me? I'm sure many of you have had this experience. I certainly had, of going into a supermarket and we're supposed to be going in one direction, and then you get somebody coming the wrong way. Alert, you know, what are you doing? And then, you know what, perhaps if I've got some form of physical disability that slows me down, maybe I'm fearful that I'm going to be getting in the way and other people will get frustrated with me. You know, whatever the reasons. But these are all kind of thoughts that people are going to be having that might make them want to stay at home, rather like the majority of you actually would rather be at home during this pandemic. So what could we do to kind of help people think differently? Because I guess when I'm thinking about you evolving this or iterating the new normal, resolving this wicked problem, it's about reinventing the whole ecosystem in which you exist with your customers. It's not about a one thing, a one-hit wonder. It's about doing a lot of different things together, but that really is challenging you to rethink. So I'm obvious stuff, right? Clear guidance on hygiene and protective measures, but in advance. It's, you know, you might have vinyls on your windows that tell people to stay 2 meters apart, that we're only letting 5 customers in at one time, that we're not accepting cash payments. But that's no good if I'm sat at home and I don't know it. So how do you get that information to me in advance? How are you preparing my mindset as a consumer to want to come to have my eyes tested? Rethinking floor layout. We're seeing lots of this in all sorts of retail environments. And I think providing floor markings is really important. Good signage that shows which way to go. So arrows, reminders, keeping apart, this direction, where to stand. Simple stuff, but really giving me confidence. And again, letting me know that this is what I can expect. So I'm thinking there's going to be a lot of digital work, social media to support this. Here's an obvious one, hand sanitizer. You know, we're encouraging people to wash their hands when they leave, but are you going to provide hand sanitizer just inside the door? Because they've touched the door handle and somebody else has touched that door handle. If like me, you've studied microbiology, you're immediately thinking, what? Did that person cough into their hand or sneeze in their hand? And have they just opened the door? I'm now potentially carrying a hazard. Waiting areas to be resized, boxes of tissues present, you know, catch those droplets and aerosols, or indeed, you know, I think this is really important. And I know in Asia, this is kind of pretty accepted as a normal, wearing masks. In the UK, I was hearing from somebody that in London this weekend, it's like nothing has changed. They've gone back to 2019. About 1 in 5 people are wearing masks, which I find shocking. It's really crazy. How do I tap into digital interactions? I think this is one of the big things that I'm encouraging you to think about in rethinking the ecosystem. And, you know, I'm encouraging you, pull on your suppliers. They're here to engage with you and support you. They have to think their new normal. They have a vested interest in your success. So I think working together is really important. And I want to signpost, we have a second webinar coming up on the 28th of May with a focus on integrating the new normal. So different topics. I hear some people thought we may be doing a rerun of webinar 1. No, it's something different. It builds on webinar 1. We're going to be looking at dealing with stress. We're hearing a lot about mental health issues because people aren't managing the stress associated with the anxiety of existing in this new situation. So I'm going to give you some practical tips on how to do that. Working on your mental toughness and resilience in order to be effective in this wicked problem space. But also we'll spend quite a bit of time talking about how we maximize the social value of digital interaction. You know, already there is evidence that 30% of business meetings going forward will not go back to physical meetings. They will be conducted using platforms like Zoom that we're on today, or Microsoft Teams, or Skype, or FaceTime. So things are changing. How are you going to bring all of that stuff into your world? So I'm hoping to see many of you back in 2 weeks. But before I hand back to Karen for the Q&A, let me just recap. We've explored a way of thinking about situations, and we now understand that coexisting with COVID-19 is all about working in that wicked problem space, high in intensity and uncertainty, no ready-made answers. It's about evolution. It's about our personal leadership. In order to do this, let's take control of a really controllable thing, which is our mindset. So we're approaching things in a helpful way, positively. And you know how to do this. Thirdly, putting customers' concerns at the heart of your thinking as you reopen. Really important. And I've given you some suggestions that would provide the kind of reassurances and confidence that customers, consumers, patients really are going to be looking for. Overall, I'm looking at COVID-19 as a portal to the future, more flexible, efficient, higher quality ways of working, reduced environmental impact. There's going to be much less business travel, whether it's local or international. There's so much opportunity ahead. And I have a great belief in humanity's ability to adapt and adopt to the new normal. Exciting times, but lots of hard work. So look, thank you for your attention today. Stay safe and healthy. Karen, I'm going to hand back to you to run our Q&A.
Thank you. Thank you, John, for such an informative and practical session. So thank you very much. My personal key takeaway is control the controllable.
Yes.
Always focus on what we can control. So we do have a number of questions on the floor. We will start asking the question with the highest vote. So if you want to a particular answer, particular question to be answered, please give it a vote. So our first question is your thoughts on positive self-affirmation on a daily basis, either vocally or written, in order to overcome uncertainty. So what are your thoughts on that?
So this is very much what I mean about mental preparation. But it depends really what you mean by positive self-affirmation. Just being kind of fluffy and saying I'm a good person and I'm loved and that sort of thing, that's really not what I mean by mental prep. I'm not saying that's unhelpful. I just don't think it's meaningful enough. So it's really thinking very deeply about the beliefs we're holding. But yes, writing them down, having them in the back of notebooks. I have them very often printed out. I have them on my iPhone, my iPad, but they're committed to memory as well. And I think it's the ability to kind of recite these in the moment is what's really important, but very, very important indeed.
And on that note, is there any particular duration or how many days would you recommend people to do it as we are building that habit?
I have to say, I think the sooner you start doing it I do it every working day. I have different beliefs around me being a decent father and husband and human being for the kind of personal side of life. But, my work mindset every morning without taking action. It's about making it a habit. If you're going to just do it randomly, I'm afraid it's not going to work.
Okay, great. So thank you. All right. So and the next question with the highest vote is how do you overcome negative thoughts on days where you feel like giving up after trying for a long time? That happens to quite a number of people.
I love this question. So one of the phrases I have in my mindset is be unsurprised by and embrace my favorite conditions. And favorite condition means when everything is going bad. So it's an example of British ironic humor. The meaning is the opposite. It is not really a favorite condition. It's the worst thing that can happen. But my mindset is this is what I train for. This is what I built my experience for. The second part of the phrase is, remember, pain is just weakness leaving the body. So I always think when I'm encountering a difficult situation, it's going to make me stronger. It's going to help me improve my recipe, the way I do things. So I actually turn, in the literal sense, what is negative into a positive. Because if I start thinking, oh, I can't do it, it's awful, I'm back into that whether you think you can or you can't, you're right, scenario. So it's just this mental trick of focusing me on, no, okay, it's tough. It's meant to be tough. I'm going to be stronger as a result. So I'm getting a positive, which interestingly rewards the pleasure centers of my brain. So I get a dopamine hit. And dopamine is very much at the heart of the addictive circuitry of our brain. So actually, you're building a very sort of useful form of addiction by tripping that pleasure circuitry to something that's positive.
That's very true. And that actually reminds me of what you mentioned earlier. We can never fail. We only learn or win. So that sentence really resonates me, and that mindset choice really is really helpful to me. Right. So we do have a number of questions. Let me continue. Okay. So another question on about setting a personal goal. So what do you feel about setting or achieving personal goals, perhaps some mini goals, even when the future may seem to be uncertain?
This is, again, a really very interesting question. Now, I break goal setting down into three areas. And apologies. I mean, I could talk for the whole hour on this subject alone, but I will keep it very brief. Okay, I talk about outcome goals. So that's about what is the end result. And in times of uncertainty, the likelihood of achieving my outcome goal becomes less because there are so many variables that I don't know and that I can't control. But I also have performance goals and process goals. Okay, so my process goals around following a process which I can control. So I'm going to do this series of steps. So if I'm an athlete, a 100-meter sprinter, I can control the process of me preparing my mental state, getting in the blocks, waiting for the gun to go, getting up and out of the blocks, rising up, really accelerating, pushing to the line. All of that's a process. My performance goal is to set a new personal best time in running the 100 meters. Equally, I might have broken down performance goals, the time from the gun going to me getting up and rising, the speed that I'm running from being vertical to the line. Now, I can manage and control all of those things. What I can't control is Usain Bolt is in the next lane. Okay? He's a freak of nature. He's going to beat me probably. But it doesn't change how I feel about things, because what's most important is, am I executing on my performance and process goals? So it keeps me very motivated. But by focusing on my performance and process goals, I maximize the likelihood of achieving the outcome goal.
Then can I ask a question related to this? So when it comes to relating to the current situation that a lot of our eye care professionals are facing, would you recommend our ECPs to focus on setting up all of these goals, or we prioritize on one or two of these goals?
That's a challenging question to answer. It's a bit kind of how long is a piece of string. What I would say is, I think you need both. You know, process and performance goals are very much about input, so you can control that. And the world generally focuses too much on only outcome goals. I believe in a balance. In my world of performance coaching, we call this disciplined performance, where I'm focused on the inputs that will drive me to the outcomes, but I'm maintaining the kind of the understanding of the causal relationship between input and output. If you're only focused on outcome, you end up living in a sort of fantasy world, which we call hopeful performance. If you're only focused on input, you're focused on a busy world where you're just doing stuff but not achieving anything. You need both.
Okay.
And in terms of numbers, okay, what my advice or guidance is always, the rule of 3 is very powerful in nature. I'd sometimes say I'll allow 5 overarching objectives, but if you can say I've only got 3 priorities, brilliant. That really keeps it simple and clear, helps us in maintaining focus.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Always focus on the input. Okay, so we have another question here. It's more related to the clinical aspect in the practice. So when there is a divide in the practice staff on what to action in the practice, example, right, wearing masks versus not wearing masks in a particular practice, what is the best way to manage the differences in mindset? That is, one side wanted to wear, the other one doesn't want to wear. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, and I would be encouraging a conversation to say, who are we wearing masks for? Particularly to the person who's not wanting to wear a mask. Because the answer ultimately is, whatever you think, it's not for you. It's for our consumers, our customers, our patients. And even if only 10% of them wanted the safety of people wearing masks, I would be saying, so we will wear masks because we want that 10%. So I'm shifting the mindset from, it's not about how you think about masks. It's about how we're going to demonstrate reassurance and confidence to our customers so that we can attract them to our business. Because I don't want to be, if I'm the store owner or the leading ECP, I don't want to be losing customers to another store where the people are wearing masks because it is providing the necessary reassurance. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes, it does. Okay, we do have a couple more questions, and it's really interesting. So one question is about, I know we're overrunning a little bit, but I do feel we should answer some of these questions. And we can choose our, okay, one question is about choosing our mindset. We can choose our mindset, but how do we know that it is the best choice and we aren't making our own rules? That is confirming our biases and all that. Any thoughts on that?
It's a great question. Look, it's a challenge. You need to be really honest with yourself. I mean, I am drawn to suggesting maybe you're having a conversation with somebody else so they can challenge you around, what bias are you applying here? The obvious answer would be go get a coach, but that's impractical for many people. So really soul searching, am I being honest with myself? And thinking through, when you're looking at a belief statement, the important thing is to think about what behavior are you wishing to avoid. So for example, maybe I'm wishing to avoid being judgmental about other people because that makes me terrorize them. So what do I need to be thinking in order to avoid being judgmental? And then I'm doing a kind of a test. Will this belief deliver that sort of behavior? Because as I said, beliefs are like filters. So this is hard work, and I do admit it's harder without a coach. That's why I'm recommending the book, actually. This Chimp Paradox really talks quite a lot about building mindset. So if there was, that would be a good resource to use to help you in that process.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. Another question, one last question here. In the current situation, heart sometimes take over the mind, our heart, sometimes take over our mindset. How to deal with it? Your thoughts?
Yeah, you have to come to webinar 2. I'm going to answer that question next time.
Okay, so to that audience, come to webinar 2. Okay, one last question, very last question here. When we are facing such an enemy which is not visible and you don't know whom to suspect, how do you keep yourself motivated that your all protections are safe, to keep you uninfected, and at the same time continue your normal day-to-day life?
It's a powerful question, isn't it? For me, this is very much about mindset. Yes, there are the practical things we need to be doing, and we need to be understanding, keeping up to date with the latest information, real information, generally ignoring anything that Donald Trump says, I think is a good idea. Sorry, that's a little political. Focus on, taking precautions, being stuff that you're comfortable with, but working on your mindset to keep you positive. We all, I have had moments where I've been thinking, oh, this is awful. When is this going to end? My business has fallen through the floor. Okay. I'm working probably at 5% of what I should be working at. Having said that, I'm working hard on rebuilding and evolving. So I'm very excited about the future. But I just want to share with you, yeah, I too get moments where I feel down, but then I remind myself, come on, John, you know how to deal with this. You've got a recipe for this situation. And then yes, I do. I do my mental prep, and then it's okay. Where's the immediate priority? What are my top 3 goals? What do I need to be focused on? Ultimately, I think we've got to see this as an opportunity. I know it's hard. And for a lot of people, there's huge tragedy associated with this as well. I'm not losing sight of that. But control the controllables. You know, we can bleed energy, end up doing nothing, which just compounds a bad situation, makes it worse. So I'm going to make a positive choice, you know, to do something and see this opportunity, seize this opportunity.
Yeah, just again, you remind me of how powerful mindset choices are and how important you know, preparing it mentally every day. It's something that it's really useful and practical. So, you know, I mean, thank you very much for sharing. Okay, so in view of time, you know, our webinar session is coming to an end. You know, after you exit the webinar, you will see in Zoom or in your web browser a link to the feedback form for this webinar. If you don't see it, don't worry at all, because you will be receiving a follow-up email tomorrow with a link to provide your feedback to us. For our Australian ECPs, thank you for attending. You will receive 1 NC point from OA, and a certification of completion will be sent out to all participants within 2 weeks' time. So once again, thank you, John, for your sharing, and most importantly, thank you everybody here for participating. Hope you enjoyed the session today. See you again in webinar 2, Integrating the New Normal, a High Performance Perspective. Take care and stay safe. We will now end the webinar session.